There are wounds that never bleed, yet ache with every breath you take. Not all pain comes from enemies. In fact, the deepest, most disorienting sorrow often comes from those who shared your name, your roof, your table. You trusted them, not because they earned it, but because you thought that's what families were supposed to do. You forgave again and again, thinking one day they might finally see the weight they placed on your heart, but they didn't. They didn't see the silent suffering. They didn't notice the way you broke inside when they dismissed your pain as drama, weakness, or rebellion. And here you are, still standing, but scarred in places no one can see. You carry memories like hidden splinters lodged too deep to extract without tearing more flesh. You pretend it doesn't hurt anymore, but there are moments, quiet, piercing moments, when the ache is unbearable. And the worst part? They never said sorry. They never owned it. They never looked into your eyes and acknowledged the wreckage they left behind. But God did. You see, there is a kind of suffering that teaches you to whisper when you want to scream. A suffering that conditions you to tiptoe around your truth so as not to make others uncomfortable. And in doing so, you become a ghost in your own story. Present, but unseen. Heard, but never truly listened to. Loved, but conditionally. And that's the cruelty of it all, being forced to shrink so that they could feel big, being guilt-tripped into silence because their reputation mattered more than your reality. You were raised in a house where blame echoed louder than compassion, where apologies were rare but accusations were many, where control was disguised as care and silence was sold as peace. You were taught to endure, not to express, taught to suppress, not to confront. And somewhere in that household, you began to believe that your emotions were liabilities, not signals of truth, that your voice was too loud, your needs too much, your sensitivity a flaw. But God, He heard the cries you muffled under your breath. He saw the tears that dried on your pillow before sunrise. He watched how you tried to love them even after they broke you, and He did not forget. You may think that because justice never came from them, it won't come at all. But justice does not require their acknowledgement. It doesn't wait on their confessions. God's justice is not tied to their willingness to make things right. It is anchored in His unwavering righteousness. He has seen it all. Not one sarcastic comment, not one moment of manipulation, not one season of cold rejection has gone unnoticed by Him. The family you longed for was supposed to protect you. Instead, they pushed you into battles you weren't old enough to understand. They should have been your shield, not your struggle, but still, you survived. Not just survived, you kept your heart from turning cold, your spirit from growing bitter. And that, my dear friend, is a miracle. That is strength they will never comprehend. What they see as your silence, God sees as restraint. What they see as your distance, God sees as wisdom. And what they call rebellion, He calls self-preservation. You are not wrong to walk away. You are not disloyal for choosing peace over chaos. Sometimes, the only way to honor your soul is to create space between you and those who keep wounding it. But the pain remains, doesn't it? Lingering. Sometimes it shows up as anxiety. Other times in your relationships, when trust feels like a trap and love feels like an illusion. You question your worth, your sanity, your past. You wonder if healing is even possible when the ones who hurt you still pretend they never did. Let me tell you something that may sound impossible. God is not done writing your story. The chapter written by your family may be one of betrayal and neglect, but it is not the final chapter. And He is not merely a comforter, He is a restorer, a repairer of what others destroyed, What they refused to take responsibility for, He will take over with redemption. God doesn't need their confession to heal you. He doesn't need their apology to bless you. What they tried to cover, He will uncover. Not to shame them, but to liberate you. He wants you to know that your experience matters, your heart matters, and your healing matters, even if they never validate it. Even if they continue their charade, their denial does not define your truth. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not dramatic for remembering what they want you to forget. You are not wrong for craving closure, and you are not alone. There is a divine witness to your pain, and He is preparing a table for you, not in private, but in the presence of those who said you'd never rise. That table is not just a feast of vindication. It's a celebration of survival, of grace, of purpose reborn in the ashes of betrayal. God is going to use your pain, not as a tomb, but as a testimony. He will turn what was meant to kill your spirit into fuel for your calling. They think they got away with it, but no one gets away with harming someone God loves and hides behind family titles. Blood may be thicker than water, but righteousness is thicker than both. And when God moves, He doesn't do it halfway. When He decides to heal you, He also starts to dismantle everything that tried to keep you bound. Stay with me. You see, healing is not simply forgetting. It is remembering with clarity and no longer being owned by the memory. It is standing tall in the presence of the past, unshaken by its shadows. It's being able to say, yes, they did this to me, but it no longer defines me. And that journey, painful and slow as it may be, is where God is most present. Not just watching, but guiding. Not just witnessing, but weaving. Quietly, patiently, powerfully. He is turning your sorrow into sacred strength. The enemy often uses family pain to disfigure your self-pity, because when those who are meant to love you first hurt you the most, it changes the way you see love, trust, and even God. It becomes easy to think that perhaps love always comes with a hidden cost, that every safe place is just a mask waiting to fall, and slowly you begin to armor your heart, not with courage, but with fear disguised as wisdom, not with strength, but with silence disguised as peace. But God never intended for you to carry that weight. He doesn't need you to pretend you're okay. He welcomes the raw, unfiltered you, the parts you've hidden because you were made to believe they were too much. The truth is, your pain is not too much for Him. Your confusion is not too complex for Him. Your grief, especially the kind caused by those you trusted, is not invisible to Him. You were not made to be someone's emotional punching bag. You were not born to be a scapegoat for the dysfunction of others. And just because it was your family doesn't make it right. God is not blind to the dynamics you endured. He doesn't excuse harm just because it came wrapped in shared DNA. In fact, He pays even closer attention to injustice that comes from those who are supposed to know better. And yet, how often have you blamed yourself for their shortcomings, for the way they twisted your words, ignored your boundaries, or refused to say sorry? You rewrote your truth to fit their comfort. You questioned your memory just to keep the peace. You held back tears because every time you expressed your hurt, you were met with cold stares or laughter. And in doing so, you became your own jailer, trapped in a cycle of guilt, shame, and silence. But God is a liberator. He doesn't just free you from sin, He frees you from narratives that never should have belonged to you. He untangles the web of lies that told you your pain was irrelevant. He dismantles the pedestal they placed themselves on and shows you the truth, not to destroy them, but to deliver you. because your healing doesn't depend on their permission. It doesn't require their cooperation. It begins when you surrender the story to Him and allow Him to rewrite the meaning of it all. There is a sacred difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is your freedom. Reconciliation is their responsibility. You are not less holy because you chose to walk away from what continued to harm you. Distance from toxicity is not betrayal, it's survival. And the God who walked with Joseph in prison, who lifted David from rejection, who healed Job after loss, is the same God walking beside you now. He knows how family pain can plant seeds of confusion in your spirit, how it causes you to question your own goodness, your worth, your belonging. But He also knows how to water those broken places until life begins to bloom again. He knows how to restore not just what was stolen, but the belief that you never deserved to lose it in the first place. You've carried this weight long enough. You've waited for them to change, to see, to finally become who you hoped they could be. But sometimes the miracle isn't in their transformation, it's in your release. Sometimes the healing isn't in what they say, but in what you finally stop saying to yourself. Like, maybe I was too sensitive, or maybe I'm the problem, or maybe if I had just tried harder. No, you did not deserve what they did. You were not too much. You were not impossible to love. You were simply placed in the care of those who hadn't healed themselves. And hurt people, when left unchecked, hurt people. But that chain ends with you. That legacy of denial, dysfunction, and deflection ends with you. And God, He is proud of you for not letting it destroy the goodness inside of you, for still choosing kindness even when it wasn't returned, for still believing in love even when yours was mishandled, for showing mercy to those who never once asked for it. That level of grace, it doesn't go unnoticed in heaven. You may not see the justice now, but it is coming. God's timing is not based on your calendar, but on His wisdom. He knows when to expose, when to vindicate, when to elevate, and when He does, it will not be petty, it will be holy, it will not be revenge, it will be restoration. Because God does not settle scores like man does. He redeems, renews, and redefines. He lifts the lowly in the very places they were once torn down. So do not think your tears have been wasted. Do not believe your prayers have been ignored. God saw it all. The nights you wept in secret, the days you smiled in pain, the moments you wanted to give up but didn't. And He is not just going to comfort you, He is going to reward you. Not because you are perfect, but because you stayed soft in a world that tried to harden you. The next part of your life does not require their approval. It requires your healing. And that healing begins when you let God into the room you've kept locked for years, the one filled with old wounds and unfinished conversations. He doesn't come to judge. He comes to sit with you, weep with you. Because one day, those who overlooked you will look up to see the very one they tried to break now standing whole, blessed and favored, not in spite of what they did, but because of what God did through it. You've lived too long under the weight of their silence, that heavy silence, the kind that pretends nothing happened, that smiles at you like history, doesn't ache inside your chest. The kind that forces you to behave like everything is normal, even when you're crumbling inside. It's the silence that erases your experiences and rewrites the story in their favor. And every time you tried to speak the truth, they turned it into an accusation, as if your pain was more disruptive than But God knows silence can be as loud as screams. He knows what it feels like to be denied by His own. He knows what it's like to offer love and be given thorns in return. He knows rejection from the ones who should have celebrated Him. That's why he is not a distant observer of your pain. He is an empathetic king, one who walks into the rooms you were cast out of and whispers, "I know." There is something holy in knowing that your story doesn't end with them. Yes, they may have started the story, but they don't get to write the ending. And the truth is, some people will never admit what they did because their pride is louder than their conscience. But their refusal to acknowledge the truth does not erase it. It only condemns them to live in the dark while you walk into the light. You must understand this. You are not responsible for their denial. You are not required to carry both your pain and their guilt. It is not your job to make them understand what they refuse to see. It is not your burden to fix what they broke but refuse to admit was ever broken. That weight does not belong to you. Lay it down. Place it in the hands of God, because He is the only one strong enough, just enough, loving enough to carry it with purpose. And when you do, when you finally release the expectation that they'll change, that they'll repent, that they'll become who you hoped they were, you begin to breathe again. That first breath may feel foreign. You may even feel guilty for letting go. But that breath, it's the beginning of resurrection. You're not betraying your family by healing from them. You're obeying the one who said He came to give life, and life more abundantly. Some wounds are inherited, passed down like heirlooms. Generational patterns of blame, gaslighting, favoritism, manipulation. The cycle continues because someone is always afraid to name it. But God didn't raise you to be a mirror of their mistakes. He raised you to be the disruption to the dysfunction. The one who says, "This ends with me." And that decision doesn't make you rebellious. It makes you courageous. You will be misunderstood. They will twist your motives. They will say you changed, when in truth you simply awakened. But don't be discouraged by their false narratives. God sees the truth that lies beneath the performance. He sees the pressure you lived under, the things you tolerated just to keep the illusion of family peace intact. He sees how many times you sacrificed your voice for the sake of unity, and how that unity never included your well-being. And God? He's not interested in preserving illusions. He's in the business of truth. And where the truth is, there is freedom. Freedom doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Sometimes it looks like unanswered calls. Sometimes it looks like walking away from the familiar to protect the future God is trying to build in you. You are allowed to mourn what never was. You're allowed to grieve the childhood you didn't get, the parents who didn't protect, the siblings who competed instead of connected, the love that came with terms and conditions. God grieves with you. He is not ashamed of your sorrow. He does not call you weak for your honesty. He is not frustrated that you still remember. In fact, your memory is sacred. It is the evidence that your heart still cares, that despite the betrayal, you still hoped. Despite the rejection, you still reached out. That is not weakness. It is the very proof of divine resilience. The world may never see the invisible battles you fought in the quiet corners of your home, but heaven does, and heaven has already begun to make preparations for your restoration, not just for what was lost, but for what was never given in the first place. You are not just healing, you are being transformed. What they thought would make you bitter has made you wise. What they thought would break you has made you unshakable. What they ignored has become the very soil where God is planting purpose. Every slight, every cruel remark, every season of loneliness, it is not wasted. God is the great economist of pain. He will extract purpose from even the most chaotic histories. And as you heal, something strange happens. You begin to see them for what they are, not as monsters, but as broken people. Not to excuse them, but to understand your own liberation. Because healing gives you the power to no longer need an apology to be at peace. Healing gives you the right to walk free from bitterness, even if they remain shackled in pride. This is the divine reversal, where the one who is dismissed becomes the one God exalts, where the one who is silenced becomes the voice of truth and love for others, where the one who is cast out becomes the builder of something better. You are not only rising, you are being prepared to be a refuge for others who suffered as you did. What they refused to be for you, God is making you for someone else. That, my friend, is sacred revenge. Not a revenge of destruction, but of transformation. You don't need them to say they were wrong, for God to show you He was always right beside you. The family that never took responsibility has no power over the future God is unfolding in your life. They may still pretend, still dismiss, still mock, but none of it will touch what God is doing in you. Because God is not bound by family scripts. He is not beholden to earthly roles and titles. He is your Father, your defender, your healer. And when He decides to move, no force, no denial, no silence, no manipulation can stop Him. There will come a moment when you stop explaining yourself, not because you no longer care, but because you've finally understood the sacredness of your own peace. There comes a day when silence is no longer the result of fear, but the evidence of healing. That moment, when your voice no longer trembles in their presence, when your identity is no longer attached to their opinion, that is the moment God has been preparing you for all along. Because He knows the truth of your story, even if they refuse to tell it. He knows the full weight of your wounds, even if they act as though you've exaggerated them. And He knows how hard it was for you to still love them, even after they gave you every reason not to. But love doesn't mean staying in harm's way. It doesn't mean forgetting what they continue to avoid. Real love, God's kind of love, frees you from having to carry the dysfunction they refuse to confront. You are not cold for choosing distance. You are not bitter for remembering. You are not faithless for drawing boundaries. You are in fact being restored to your rightful design, your soul unclenched, your spirit unburdened. You were not created to carry the weight of generational avoidance. You are not designed to suffocate beneath other people's pride. And God will not allow you to remain bound by the lies they told to avoid their own accountability. You may feel like you're walking alone right now, but you are not. God walks closely with the wounded. He defends the unheard. He lifts the heads of the rejected, and He knows how to restore what no one else acknowledged as broken. He does not need a family meeting to declare your worth. He does not need a group consensus to begin your healing. He is enough. His voice is louder than their silence. His affirmation is stronger than their rejection. You don't have to convince anyone anymore. Not your parents, not your siblings, not the extended relatives who believed the surface but never asked about the story beneath it. That burden is over. Because God never needed them to validate what He already knew, that you were treated unfairly, that your heart was trampled, that your spirit was crushed in the very place that should have been your sanctuary. And He does not stand idly by. He acts, maybe not in the way you imagined, maybe not with lightning from the sky or dramatic apologies at the dinner table, but He acts in ways that shift atmospheres. He acts in ways that expose, gently but undeniably. He acts by giving you strength they cannot explain, peace they cannot steal, a future they cannot control. What they called rebellion, God calls courage. What they dismissed as overreaction, God sees as a cry for justice. And what they mock in private, He will redeem in public. Because the same Jesus who was betrayed by those closest to him, who was mocked by his own, who was left alone in the garden while his friends slept, that same Jesus is alive in your story. There is a kind of healing that doesn't come with fanfare. It comes quietly in the soft places. In your morning breath when you no longer wake up dreading the day, in the laughter that slowly returns after years of silence, in the friendships that feel like family in the way blood never did, in the confidence that rises when you speak without flinching. That is the work of God. That is resurrection in real time. And slowly, as you heal, you'll begin to look at yourself through different eyes. You'll see that the one who was always left out now stands in the center of God's attention. The one who was always talked about now speaks with wisdom. The one who was always blamed now walks in freedom. You were never a problem to be fixed. You were a soul to be seen. And God sees you. He sees you right now, still aching, still sorting through the past, still wondering why they can't just say, "We were wrong." He knows what that apology would mean to you, and while he may not force them to say it, he will never stop showing you, in every detail of your life, that you were right to feel what you felt, that your pain was not imaginary, that your story is safe in his hands. This is the part where you begin to rise, not out of revenge, but out of release, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that freedom is possible. You don't have to keep replaying the scenes in your head. You don't have to keep hoping they'll finally become the people you needed them to be. God is writing a new chapter, one where you no longer walk into rooms wondering if you belong, but carry your belonging wherever you go. And in this chapter, you are not defined by their silence, but by his presence. In this chapter, you are not bound by family patterns, but released into divine purpose. In this chapter, you are no longer the child begging to be understood. You are the soul embraced by the one who knew you before your mother's womb. And one day, when they see what God has done with the life they once discounted, when they see your joy, your peace, your wholeness, it will be undeniable. They may never say a word, they may never admit what they did, but their silence will shift from dominance to defeat. Because nothing confounds the arrogant like the flourishing of the one they tried to bury. And God, he will keep building you up, not to shame them, but to glorify himself through your life. You are his canvas. And the very strokes of pain they painted will be repurposed into a masterpiece of healing, strength, and radiant hope. And maybe now you begin to understand something sacred, something you could only learn by walking through the valley of betrayal with open wounds and silent prayers. That pain, as awful as it was, became the passageway to a different kind of intimacy with God. You learned to talk to him not as a distant deity, but as the only one who truly understood, the only one who never walked away, the only one who didn't blame you for hurting, because that's what happens when you grow up in a house where apologies were foreign and compassion was rationed. Your soul starts to believe that maybe your suffering is too inconvenient to be acknowledged. Maybe your memories are too uncomfortable to be heard, and in that silence you slowly fade, shrinking not because you want to, but because there's no safe place to fully be. But God was the safe place they never created. He heard the things you never dared to say out loud, the buried confessions, the tangled emotions, the words you rehearsed but never released because you knew they would twist them against you. He saw the strength it took just to show up, to stay soft, to keep hoping, to try one more time, even when you knew you'd be disappointed again. You thought they'd notice one day, that maybe they'd have a moment of clarity, That perhaps in some divine reversal, the people who wounded you would suddenly become healers. But that moment never came, and it broke something inside of you, the last sliver of hope you clung to. You stopped expecting change. You stopped believing they even had the capacity to see. But God never stopped believing in you. While they hardened, He remained tender toward you. While they deflected, He leaned in. While they gaslit, He grounded you in truth. And while they looked away, He fixed His eyes on you. Eyes of mercy, of wisdom, of love, that never asked you to be less than who you are. And maybe now you see that the healing you needed wasn't just about recovering from the past. It was about reclaiming who you've always been beneath their projections. Because you were never the liar. You were never the problem. You were never the weak one, the dramatic one, the outsider. You were simply honest in a family that feared the truth. And that truth, your truth, is holy. It matters to God. He is not just the author of your future, He is the redeemer of your history. Every painful scene, every unspoken thought, every crushed expectation is being rewritten, not erased, but reinterpreted through His eyes. And where others saw a broken mess, God sees a vessel of sacred resilience. You didn't choose this pain, but you do get to choose what happens next. You can choose to keep chasing after people who won't change, or you can step into the life that was waiting for you all along, the one where your identity is not dependent on who accepts you, but on the one who designed you, the one who calls you beloved, chosen, and free, the one who sees every scar as evidence that you endured, and that you are still worthy of joy, of wholeness, of a life that doesn't apologize for existing. There is so much life ahead of you, life untouched by their dysfunction. It might not look like the family dinners you dreamed of. It might not come wrapped in familiar faces, but God is building you a new table, a new circle, a new legacy, one that begins with truth and ends in love. One that doesn't demand silence to keep the peace. One that sees you, hears you, and loves you without requirement. And here's the beauty. What was stolen in one season, God restores in another. He restores your voice. He restores your clarity. He restores your sense of self. And even more, He gives you discernment, so you no longer confuse familiar pain with family love. You no longer feel obligated to remain in rooms that suffocate your spirit. You no longer feel guilt for choosing what is healthy over what is habitual. Because healing isn't betrayal. Healing is obedience. It's you responding to the invitation of a God who refuses to leave you in places that dishonor your worth. A God who will not allow generational patterns to determine your future. A God who is fiercely protective of the soul He handcrafted. So when they mock your silence, don't explain. When they criticize your distance, don't defend. When they rewrite the story to favor themselves, don't argue. Because you are no longer living for their understanding, you are living in God's truth. And the truth doesn't need permission to exist. The truth is this: they hurt you, and they never took responsibility. They left you with a burden you were too young, too soft, too loyal to carry, and still you carried it. Until now. Now God is lifting it from your shoulders. Now God is breaking the chains disguised as tradition. Now God is restoring what you never received, rebuilding what they tore down, reviving what they tried to bury. And He's doing it not because they apologized, but because He never forgot. He remembers everything. The way your heart twisted in your chest when you were blamed for their mess. The way your voice trembled when you finally spoke the truth. the way you walked away not in pride, but in deep, sacred sorrow. He saw it all, and he called it holy. He still does. One day you'll look back and marvel, not at how they changed, but at how you did. How you became whole in a world that tried to fracture you. How you grew into strength even as you mourned what never was. How you built peace out of ruins, found hope in places they never thought to look, and held on to love without bitterness, even when love was not given to you. Because the greatest miracle isn't that God removes the pain instantly, it's that He walks with you through it. He lets you question, weep, crumble, and rebuild over and over until one day the pain becomes less defining than the purpose it unlocked. Yes, your past shapes you, but it does not own you. Your family may have started your story, but they do not get to be the author of your healing. That belongs to God alone, He who knows the story in full, He who holds all the broken chapters and yet never once doubts the ending. He wrote for you victory, redemption, peace. And perhaps that's the ultimate justice, not that they suffer, but that you flourish, that you rise, not with bitterness in your bones, but with clarity in your soul, that you no longer have to prove your worthiness, that your existence becomes the evidence of God's faithfulness, that the very things they use to diminish you become the very things God uses to elevate you. You do not need to carry shame anymore. You do not need to carry their guilt, their denial, their expectations. Let them go. Lay them down. Bury them not in anger, but in surrender. For when you release what they refuse to fix, you make room for God to do what only He can. Turn injustice into a stage for restoration. He's already doing it. With every tear you've cried in secret, with every prayer you whispered while questioning if it even mattered, with every quiet step you've taken toward healing, even when it felt like betrayal. He's been weaving it all together, not for performance, but for redemption. He is not just healing your heart, He is healing your memory, not to make you forget, but to allow you to remember without breaking. He is giving you back the parts of yourself you buried to survive, the laughter, the confidence, the trust, the softness, all of it, it's coming back. Not as a replica of who you were before the pain, but as a fuller, more radiant version of who you were always meant to be. And yes, there will be moments when the ache returns, a smell, a song, a phrase, and suddenly the wound reopens. But even then, God will meet you in that moment, not with condemnation, but with compassion. He will remind you, you are not who they said you were. You are who He says you are. He says you are chosen. You are healed. You are free. There's no more need to hide, no more pretending to be okay just to make others comfortable, no more apologizing for the distance you needed. No more questioning if you imagined it all. You didn't. It happened. And still, you are rising. They may never see the full impact of what they did, but God sees. He always saw. And because of that, nothing was in vain. Every tear was counted. Every wound was noticed. Every silent scream was heard. And now is the time for newness. The time for restoration, the time for joy that doesn't ask for permission, the time for a future that does not include waiting for apologies that may never come. Let them sit with their silence. Let them live in the safety of denial, but you walk forward in truth, in love, in the overwhelming freedom of being held, heard, and healed by a God who never turned away. You were never invisible to Him. You were never too much for Him. You were never alone, not even once. And now he will finish what they tried to destroy, not because you begged, not because they confessed, but because he is just, because he is merciful, because he loves you that much. Welcome to your new chapter, written not by their hands, but by his, one where you are no longer the wounded child, but the radiant soul redeemed by grace, guided by truth, and crowned with a peace they never gave you, but God always promised.